Hi everyone, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Zivile and I'm your host. And today's episode moves through three arcs: identity and childhood across three continents, the deliberate path into one of the AI's fastest growing companies, and an honest look at AI's biggest open question right now: how much autonomy do we actually give it? Along the way, ego, ambition, burnout, and building a life in seasons. So, ladies and gentlemen, my guest for the day is Anne Maria Salmela, who is right now working for the hottest company in San Francisco, Resolve AI. And let's dive in. Host Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. And today I have with me Anne, calling straight from the other side of the world in the US. Hi, Anne, welcome.
Hi, Zivile. Nice to see you. Long time no see from Rwanda a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's nearly gonna be 3 years, in fact, which is wild how time flies in a way.
Yes,
But
and we've almost known each other for 10 years after meeting in Slush in 2018.
yeah, which is even more like surprising, like how time flies and how different shapes and directions our lives took since then. I guess for the audience to get a bit of a context, we met at Slash. You were leading the team back then, right? And I was part of your volunteering team for the
Yes,
side events.
yes, exactly. We had a team of international people who flew in for Slush, and we were all very excited by the buzz of the energy. And I knew exactly when I read your application that you would be the right person to be having on this team.
That was so cool. I'm so grateful. And I remember we had some coffee and then reconnecting during project in Rwanda was really wild. Like I didn't have it in my bingo card, to be honest. Like to go there and then to meet someone you've met before, and then it reconnected us and reshaped our connection. That was so great and such a good time and learnings. And since then, 3 years ago, I've been following your journey very actively. We would be in touch, we would jump on the calls. And I was always very fascinated about your very diverse profile, your very always ambitious goals and hands-on work on different projects across continents, Europe, Middle East, United States. I was like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm right now in Middle East. Oh, yes, right now I'm Saudi Arabia. Oh, actually, I've just moved to the US. Just FYI. I was like, that's incredible. And every project was even more fascinating, very up trendy with the technology, 5 steps ahead. I guess the good conversation starter would be about the fact that I learned before this conversation with you that you were a Finnish Math Olympian kid and at the same time a competitive dancer. Would you like to share a bit more how these two things correlated and then brought you to the investment world?
Okay, yeah. So to start off, I'm half Finnish and half Mongolian. And my parents met in Mongolia, where I grew up for the first 3 years. And then we moved to the Philippines for 6 years. And I moved to Finland when I was 9 and lived there until I graduated from high school. So the fact about me was that I was an incredibly awkward primary school student. I really tended towards books. I found that the most comfortable place. Didn't find it the easiest to make friends or a crowd. And the breakthrough moment for me was really through dancing. That's how I learned Finnish fluently as a preteen. That's how I built my confidence and I built structure and routine in my life. And it ended up taking me a pathway where I ended up becoming a competitive dancer, which won multiple national championships and world championships, and was competing on behalf of Finland. And it was a byproduct of a personal journey that I was also going through that time. And coincidentally, I also found math as a place of problem solving and meditation through incredible tutelage, and ended up spending the summer when I was 16 studying this research essay where I grabbed all the books from the university and then went down this rabbit hole of trying to understand non-differential equations and how to solve epidemic modeling through mathematical formula. And that ended up winning Finland's national math competition. And I represented Finland in Europe as well. So they were both rabbit holes of independent journeys. Like one was self-confidence and the other was meditative problem solving. And And it's a byproduct of like fascination, curiosity, and both.
Wow, that's very impressive and very unique, I would say, journey. Did you have anyone guiding you to actually pick up math or dancing, or it came serendipitous into your life?
I'm very grateful for my mother for encouraging me to try out for the dance team. I was, as I said, I was not confident, so I didn't believe that I would have qualified. And she gave myself a nudge as well as the coach a nudge because I was slightly younger for the age bracket in the team. I was 11 and the team was 12 to 15. And the coach took a bet on me. My mom said, trust me, she'll improve a lot. And I did ended up improving where I was like dancing in the back row in my first season of competition. And then by the time it was the next season, I was in the front row and they would use me in all the lifts, which was like a very big honor at the time. And I was so delighted about that.
Wow.
And for math, I had the best teacher I've ever had in my life in my math high school courses. Extremely disciplined, extremely focused, extremely passionate. And when you have an amazing tutee tutor relationship, I think it's really easy for you to give in that process.
Wow. And do you recall how did you feel when you actually changed from the back row to being the girl that people look after in a way because you're a success and you actually revealing your personality, your charisma, and getting out of this shell?
I do remember because that was a time period in my life where I had a lot of also egotistical ambitions as well. I said I would want to get into the best university in the world because that is so great to tell people that I got into the best university in the world. Or I would like to be on stage because it's so great to tell people that I did that. But once I experienced this journey of understanding that it's much less about the outward appraise and more about my inner enjoyment of the process, that's where the real fruits of the labor really came out. I remember during both time periods, I was so much more focused on how I'm feeling peaceful and in the zone and gaining personal delight out of the process. And that's where I really reap the rewards as opposed to focusing on like an external label in either. So when I think of that time period, I think of more joy than I think of stress in any part.
Wow, that's a very beautifully expressed period of your life that you actually turned it into a very positive experience and learn how to also nurture that, which is sometimes when we keep growing up and having those goals just because to validate our own actions can create a very complex further relationship with environment and also our things we do in daily life, and we stopped actually being present on a daily notice and we just wait for the next best thing to happen. So that's impressive to hear that you've learned that at such a young age. I'm very curious to learn, so what made you to take the leap and go into this all investment banking career, venture capital, then startups, when it seems like you had so many different opportunities and doors that could have been open for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would trace it back to Slush actually. So when I was 15, I was encouraged to volunteer at Slush. And Slush, for those that are not familiar, is one of Europe's leading startup conferences. It's highly concentrated in European founders, VCs, and LPs. And it's very much known for its like intimate feeling and really being builder focused. And so that exposure was the first time I ever met such international people in Finland. I was handing out coats at Coat Check as a volunteer. And I remember hearing all these like Silicon Valley accents and saying, whoa, like they came all the way here to our city to talk about tech and investments. And it opened my doors for what climate tech was, what health tech was, what venture capital is, and how you can deploy capital in a way that is conscious about the outcomes and the returns in a sustainable manner. Meanwhile, I had grown up in Mongolia, Philippines, and Finland, and I was very set on doing a career in development economics. But as I read more about loan structures and the IMF and the World Bank, I found that there's very long project cycles, very high project overhead costs, and a lot of those go towards the consultants who are deployed to those countries and many other systematic realizations. And so I was in this parallel of I thought I was going to be a development economist working for the World Bank, but I was thrust in this environment where people are deploying very high amount of checks for projects that they believe that will also create a lot of impact very quickly. And they are also held accountable to it by investors. And so that's when I flipped and said, I want to be the world's best impact investor, thinking really deeply about like what are the causes that I went down or the causes that I care about. And so I ended up interning at Finnish consulting group where we deployed a lot of capital to international projects to the Finland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I also interned with the American Chamber of Commerce, where we were thinking about how is capital deployed in Finland's business environments? Like, are they allocating money to cancer research in Espoo, or are they allocating it elsewhere? And then I went to venture capital internships, and I just kind of pursued the opportunity to understand what is a thoughtful and robust method for deploying capital. I even went down a stint of effective altruism just to understand what is one thought approach to investing. Of course, I didn't take any paradigm as like a strict one. I was open-minded to different ones. And that's how that began my brief time in a venture capital career, so to speak.
Yeah, but I would say brief, but very impactful as well, actually. You've mentioned that you wanted to become this kind of the world impact investor. And we keep repeating the impact, social change. What does impact stand for you actually when you refer to the investment field?
So, in terms of the impact, I think there's a personal and there's a global impact. On a personal level, I'm very conscious about how am I improving the lives of the people around me. And that's a more like personal, unquantifiable metric. And then, but in terms of like a global perspective, there's a framework of volume and there's also a framework of depth. Depending on what your cause of impact is, it would be ideally penetrating deeply the lives of a select number of people is something I would focus on. And so I think the way that philanthropy organizations are deploying have that thesis, and effective altruism has a mechanism where they want each dollar having the highest return on each person's life. That is like one way to think about it. But for me, the causes that I care a lot about are access to education, whether it's like through scholarships or enablement or creating schools, as well as access to like health resources for so that they can reach the last mile of like healthcare delivery as well.
Wow, that's truly inspiring. I recall from the Slush time as well, because you were very young when you were a team lead. You just had it with full confidence, very clear why, what you want to do next. And after Rwanda experience, you were doing some big scale projects as well. How did you get into that environment at such a young age and overall into a new continent from
Yeah,
Europe? You
so
find yourself there.
I was pretty determined about studying abroad outside of Finland at that time. So I applied to maybe 7 different countries for university. And I was flown out to a couple of them. That includes Singapore, Cambridge, UK. I went to the UAE as well. And I visited Amsterdam. And I was invited by a university for a trip, which I was very excited by. And this university ended up having the group of people that I resonated with the most. They were very diverse, very open-minded, and it was the first time they ever asked me questions about my background that weren't, where are you really from? Which I received a lot in different variations because the thought of a unique background was somewhat rare in the context that I was growing up in Finland. And whereas it was like very plain and simple for everyone else that like, oh, of course she's Finnish Mongolian that grew up in the Philippines. Like this is like not anomaly for us. And that's where I really felt like home. And so when I came back from my trip to the UAE that was sponsored as an interview for the university, I came back and my mom said to me, I really like the version of yourself now when you came back. You're very peaceful and you seem much wiser. And so we discussed and we thought like this is the type of environment that I could really flourish in for the next 4 years. So I ended up doing a full scholarship with NYU where I was based in Abu Dhabi, New York, Berlin, London, and Ghana during my degree. And a large part of it was based in Abu Dhabi. And that's how I ended up as like my first launch pad into the Middle East, which started a series of different investment projects.
What were those questions that stuck with you that you felt, okay, that's my environment where actually I feel understood and I feel seen?
Yeah, I would say I remember I just had so many conversations with people that stayed going on till like 4 a.m. that day. It was just a huddle of us, and we had my friend from Ethiopia that just spent the summer in Europe on like like a knowledge exchange, and then I had my friend from Egypt who was talking about what type of like extracurriculars he did in his free time, and then there was just everyone had a different sense of home and had so many different side personalities and projects that didn't contain them in one box, which made everyone unique but similar in their ability to be like diverse. And I also like that people ask the question like where's home for you, instead of where are you from, because that can be like a different question for someone. So now when I host dinners and I bring communities together in San Francisco, my two questions are where's home for you and what is something that would improve your life right now. And then we do a circle where everyone shares like what are they looking for in their life, and then somehow someone in the group usually has like a solution for them in that space.
Wow, that's very powerful. And I love that question, where is home for you? Because especially nowadays, it's so broad and so different, and we all have different tools that we navigate through and that makes us feel home. And you've mentioned you're in San Francisco hosting right now dinners. Again, new culture, new environment. It's, if I recall it right, it's been 2 years and you moved nearly 2 years and you moved there to work in one of the hottest companies right now in San Francisco. Maybe you can tell us more about how did you end up taking the leap and making again the change from the place, which seems to be for you a very grounded environment where you can learn a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So after I decided to study in the Middle East, I ended up launching the UAE's largest youth startup community called Violet Ventures. And so my big pain point that I was solving there was that I wanted to find entrepreneurial people that wanted to solve problems bigger than themselves. But I didn't have a community or a club or a group of people to go to. So we decided to create one. And I ended up having a team of 30 volunteers where we brought Slush to the Middle East. We brought Start Summit to the Middle East. We built this pipeline for VCs, the leading VCs in the region. And we also organized the largest AI hackathons in the region. And so it ended up building this like multiple 1,000-person community of young founders. And that's how I knew I wanted to keep building for the rest of my life. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to keep building things from scratch that solved pain points that I cared about. And so I ended up being an early team member of a fund to launch a large fund in Saudi Arabia. And we brought pre idea founders together and we helped them do matchmaking and build their first prototype and do their investment. And I was one of the first team members to move out there. And it was like a super exciting project to do that. And then once that project was done, I helped launch a hedge fund in UAE, which was incubated by an MIT team that had a strategy and wanted to deploy in the Middle East and wanted someone who was based there who had some expertise. So after those series of projects, I knew I loved the 0 to 1 stage of forming things. It's like I did my community, I did my VC fund experience, I worked with a hedge fund. Now I wanted to really do the bread and butter product, and I wanted to do it in the epicenter of technology. And by no doubt, it is San Francisco. So I set out on this journey to find the best founder that I wanted to work with. And I was looking for a very high EQ, high IQ founder that had sold multiple companies and was ready to build a Decacorn Plus. And I wanted to work like a dog. And that's what I told everyone. I did so many coffee chats and I told everyone this exact sentence.
Wow.
And I kept meeting people. I kept meeting people in New York, in London, in Dubai. And then on a whim, I was overlapping in San Francisco for 1 week with Spiros Santos, who's the founder of Resolve AI. And we had 3 coffee chats and we really hit it off. And he said, could you move to San Francisco next week to work with us? And I said, okay, I need to like handle some things in my life first to be ready for this global move. But I'm I love the idea. And so that's how the journey with Resolve AI started.
Okay, that's very wild. Thank you for sharing because that's very common to get the question when you're in the startup environment. Oh, how do I get into the most sexy startup, or how can I work with a $1 billion company that is starting earlier than on the final success round? So question number one, how did you find all those people to talk to? Did you use some platform? Was it LinkedIn, or do you have your own way to spot the talent?
Yes. So I walked in with a very clear articulation of what I'm looking for and what I'm good at and what work environment I'm compatible with. So I think it's important to have that predetermined in your mind because it helps narrow down your focus a lot. So for me, I knew I wanted to work with a serial founder, and I also wanted someone who had a lot of like stability in their presence, like not going ups and down with the waves of hype cycles. I love the phrase, you can tell a lot about a man's character when they have everything and when they have nothing. And that is especially the case for a founder. You can be on a high from winning or getting $100 million fundraise, but you can be on a low when you have a bad quarter. So, who is someone that can ride that wave with resilience is super important. And so, A, I had a clear understanding of what I wanted. B, I put myself out there and I focused on like, how can I maximize my surface area of luck? So that means traveling to different locations and cities where I have a hypothesis that I would enjoy living there. How can I meet as many interesting people there? And how can I get a coffee with someone at this interesting event? After I get a coffee with them, I ask them to introduce me to 2 more people or another person in their network. And then that compounds and keep compounding after that. And then you can also think about ways of how can I be of value to them? How can I introduce them to each other or help them some way in their life? So that's also beyond just a coffee chat. It's like, how can you maintain a relationship that's abundant? And eventually, the combination of those 2 things ends up at your goal. I truly believe it.
How long did it take you to find Resolve AI and Spiros?
I would say it took a couple of months of intentionality, but I'm also a believer that it's like 80% work and 20% luck. So I had done the work to be in a position to receive the luck, but you can't 100% maneuver it into the 100% all the time.
Yeah, but what I'm also hearing, you were so clear what you want, what can you bring on the table, that immediately eliminates lots of miscommunications in a way. And so Resolve, why Resolve, and why the team you're working right now with? What really caught you that, oh yeah, that's the chapter where I really want, as you said, to work as a dog, to learn, to bring the value and to thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to just to comment on the previous topic is that I'm also a believer of thinking about like an elevator environment. If you walk into the elevator with the exact person that you need to be meeting in your life right now, so like let's say you walk into the elevator with Warren Buffett or Elon Musk or the person that can open up all the doors in your life, what do you have to say in 30 seconds that puts you in a position to receive that opportunity? Have you done the work to, let's say if you're a founder, have you done the work to understand your market, understand what your prototype would be? And the only thing you need is a check in order to fulfill that. Then yes, that means you've done the work to be in that position. If you don't have anything to say in that elevator, you're not yet ready to receive like magnificent luck like that. So I think about it as well as like, what am I doing to constantly put myself ready for the next opportunity? And that it is a different type of framework to think about it in that way. So, but then to your question about Resolve AI, I really made the decision based on my interactions with the founders. They were just exactly the type of personality I was looking for. And they also had the wisdom of having multiple exits together and having their previous team members follow them to this company that really sold the deal for me. because you're going to have eventual product pivots, even especially from a seed company onwards. So while the market circumstances will change, while the exact outlook of the product will change, it's like, who are you working with? And are you inspired by them? And do you enjoy working with them? Is the really big question that I had. And then what is the humanity that we experience? Like, we care for each other and we care for the product. And that's what really sold me in that experience. And second is the humility to also bounce ideas with each other in an interview stage. You can have a large ego and not be open minded to other solutions, or you can say everyone has a contribution and like, let's brainstorm together. And so what sold me as well was the fact that the founders were excited to talk about solutions and problems with somebody who's only like interviewing to come to the company. It's like, oh, if this is what the interview is like, what would it be like working together with them? And it did hold true completely. It's like everything is about brainstorming for a better solution instead of having an ego battle about who owns what or who is the project owner or like who gets credit for this project. It's not about that, but much more on like, what are the outcomes and how are we getting there as best as possible? So, and I think it translated really well from the conversation phase to like the actual operation phase.
I'm so happy to hear it. And thank you for sharing all those steps. I think it's so crucial for all of us to remember that things can happen by luck, but you need to put some extra work and clarity and go proactively and find your next shot, next opportunity, next problem you want to solve. And talking about the problem, so what kind of problem right now you're focused with resolve? Because it's pretty broad and wide. With AI, did you have to pivot or you're still into the same flow since the moment you joined?
Yes. So Resolve AI focuses on solving production problems with AI and remediating them. So whenever a server goes down or something in the production environment goes down, an engineer is usually paged, can be late at night as well. And they have to go on their laptop, they have to troubleshoot and fix it. So it can disrupt sleep, it can disrupt their work. And this is the type of work that we had the thesis that AI should be able to solve. Like, how can we make people's lives easier and just improve delight for every engineer's experience? And so, as a result, every company in the world is a customer. It is a pain point and it's deeply felt. The journey that we've been on is we started selling for a couple of quarters already, and we now have customers like Salesforce, Coinbase, DoorDash, MongoDB. So some of the largest enterprise customers in the world. So we're focusing always on how do we improve quality of our product in resolving incidents? How can we expand our use cases? And how can we make the flow of our work into other areas of engineering easier? Because we have a ton of information about how an engineer thinks and works. Like, how can that extend in a way that provides value? And so I think it's the grind of doing that, and of course, like serving more customers that we can.
And what's the hardest technical, perhaps, or maybe trust problem right now that you're solving as well when someone is letting in an agent to take autonomous actions in someone's production environment, if I understand it correctly, right? And it's lots of trust-based data issues, and we're also reluctant usually to change that we don't understand. So
Yeah.
can you tell us more? How do you go around this?
Yeah, so we definitely have gating so that it still requires a human to approve a remediation and a change in the loop. And so that's like one way that we approach it. And so we call it human on the loop instead of human in the loop. Like, and so I think about that, people are very happy about that process to be aware of it. But if we zoom out, the bigger question people have is like whether I'm able to build all of this in-house with models versus should I be outsourcing or like buying from AI companies? Because with the development of all the new models, whether it's open source or ChatGPT or OpenAI or Anthropic, the question now is why do I need anyone else to build my solutions as opposed to building it with models? And that's the very fascinating question of like do we need to buy software anymore because of the introduction of AI? And there's a question about A, build versus buy, and like B, how do we measure value and outcomes in that area? And so this is what everyone in the AI market is maybe like on is reacting very quickly to, of like how can we keep providing value and how do we also make that very clear to everyone that this is the value that you're getting from every type of effort that we're making.
Is there one correct answer for that?
I think it's the question of it's thinking about first principle business problems in a different way. We've always had this problem in the past. And the way I think about it is like twofold. It's like you always provide value either by A, having a better product, which is always something that you should shoot for as a North Star as a company. We're very like mission driven, we're very research oriented. We also have a model in house that we're building where we hired Dhruv, who was leading Llama's post-training team at Meta, and he brought some of his research engineers, and they're building an in-house model with the thesis that we can improve our product quality to be significantly better than other models because it's trained specifically for the problem set that we have. So we're thinking about pushing our product quality always to the frontier. And then the second thing that you can think about as a business is like, what is the opportunity cost of your customer's time? Do they really want to be deploying resources to building another product when they could be instead deploying people towards their primary product? And that's where like a cost evaluation comes in, opportunity cost of time. And I think if you figure out the right balance between those, you'll always have a successful business, regardless of like what era of AI we're in.
And at the end of the day, when you look into the competition and company building, yeah, the processes are changing, but it's still like business is business. You just have to do what you have to do. You have to solve the problem. If you solve the problem, that's great. But then while solving that problem, right, we just caught up with you also briefly before the call. The structure of work is changing, right? We are automating more and more workflows, and the purpose of some roles are either disappearing or shifting. How do you see overall the changing environment, especially right now where you are, where people spend their most time off, and what kind of skill sets we should look into consideration to be in the same race with the technology change?
Yes. So I think this is a topic that's very much on my mind as well as the people around me. I believe San Francisco sees a bit of a front run of the global trends just because technology is deployed here faster and ingested and moved on from as quickly. Like, for example, we have our autonomous cars that drive without a driver. And that's like technology here that might ripple effect elsewhere. So what we're seeing here around us is that companies are attempting to displace a lot of roles with AI and doing a large amount of layoffs. Maybe it's 10,000 or 8,000 at a time for jobs that were previously administrative or somewhere in the supply chain. And so there's a couple different ways to think about it. And one is like, how can you retrain people to thinking about the same problem, but in a different way? Like there's infinite ways that we can keep growing as a society to keep like providing more to humanity. Like, have we solved all of humanity's problems? No. There's still a lot more that can be done. And how can we reshift people's attention to a different type of work that still serves the end function, as opposed to doing a layoff? So that's how, like, one way I would think about it. And the second is I would think about value in society as a role beyond just monetary and professional distinction. It's like, what does value look like beyond that? Is that in community organization? Is that in home structures? There's a labor economics paper. There's so many labor economics principles based on like, how do we have value at home, and like, how do we quantify that? Do we need to quantify it? There's also how can we be doing more volunteering? How can we do more to the environment, even though that's not something that anybody would necessarily pay for because it's a good that serves the entire population? So I think there's going to be really interesting streams of thought on the second half of like, how can we think of purpose in society differently than we had previously, and how it's not as attached to our professional roles as it once historically was.
When it comes to the skill set and that purpose, like right, you were mentioning, well, that requires lots of kind of a cultural mindset change, a bit philosophical shift. And the education usually comes, first of all, from the government bodies. Yes, we have access to the different sources, but we still have the structural programs. How could governments actually react to this change and be way more agile? Because what we're seeing right now, it seems like some of the countries are way too slow to integrate the technological changes into the curriculum. And some of the countries are more ahead. And you mentioned that you've been looking a bit into the Finnish case and maybe have some insights to share.
I think Finland is a very interesting example because, for those that don't know, we have a universal basic income model, and we also have a really robust welfare system where education is free, healthcare is free, public transport is accessible to everyone. Like, student loans are like virtually interest free, and yet there's also a large amount of societal dysfunctionality in some ways because of maybe alcoholism or depression that also might relate to the nature that happens. And so you can ask yourself, like, what are the pieces that involve a purpose-filled society beyond providing these basic amenities? Is it there's like something that's unstructurable involved there? It's about a community feeling, it's about a love feeling, it's about emotions that can bring joy beyond that. And I think a government's involvement there could be, how can we make it easier for people to construct their life around joy and community? Like, maybe that's about thinking about urban economics of, like, how can we have smaller but more concentrated community urban centers that revolve around a central meeting point or playground or like interaction or like a market. They can think more about ways to enhance your ability to get access to things through this type of structure, as well as, like, oh, through more volunteering and community involvement, you can get a better placement in your house in this lot, for example. It requires a little bit of creativity to think about what is joy beyond work and like a monetary transaction, and how can you organize a society around that. But there's some towns and cities and like small countries that have aimed to do that really successfully. And I think could be an interesting prototype, especially in a world post AI.
100%. I agree with you. Well, unfortunately, we're getting closer to the end, but I have a couple of more questions for you so you can continue, run the day, and win the world. As someone who is right now in a very fast-paced environment in the company that is aiming to become billion-dollar company, Decacorn, with big ambition, how do you navigate your life and keep yourself, let's say, in a healthy mindset, mind-body relation, not burning out, but also actually going that extra mile to get where you're heading to?
So I'm a big believer in seasonality. So there are seasons where you focus on certain areas and or pizza slices of your life that are extremely important while maintaining the other pizza slices. So let's say if you say, like, I have a specific problem at work that I want to focus on for the next 4 months, and I want to dedicate all my time to that. Maybe I have less time for friends or working out, etc., but I can do that at a minimal basis. And and once you've achieved that goal, maybe you feel like you want to cycle into a different area. Maybe you want to pour a bit more into community and finding out who are your friends in a new city. Maybe you want to circle out into saying, like, I have certain fitness goals and I want to be competing at a national or international level in this discipline. Let me put more emphasis on training every day for 2 hours, for example. And you can determine the durations of your seasons and you can determine what are your focus areas, but cycling in and out of them while doing maintenance of others, I think, is one really healthy way to have a robust and abundant life and do everything you want, like, during your lifetime, because there's so many things you can become an expert in one lifetime, honestly.
Where are you becoming an expert right now?
Right now, so I recently cycled out of like a year-long season of like a certain goal that I had at work. And so now my season is focusing a bit more on my health right now, like more on like improving my sleep as well as becoming better at tennis. And I'm doing a high rocks competition tomorrow as well. So I'm
No
focusing
way.
So I'm like I had a goal of mine to be able to like play a really solid tennis match and do multiple high rocks competitions in my season now, and then I think that will rotate into like another project shortly.
I love it. Anna, when you're back in Europe, we have to get into the tennis match.
We'll do that.
Incredible. So I have a tradition in this podcast to leave the listeners with a thought to ponder. It seems like we spoke a lot about your choices, your mindset, your career directions, and what led you to the point where you are right now. So what would be your maybe final thought you would like to share with the listeners to continue the day?
Yes, I would like to leave the thought with the listeners of what is something that you would like to exist around you, and what is a small action every day you could do to make that happen? Because it's so much more tangible than you realize.
What can I say? Nothing else to add. Anna, thank you so much for finding time today to get on the call, to share your story. I really appreciate that and can't wait to hear about your next seasons, next challenges. And I hope you just rock your High Rocks competition and see you at the tennis court. So thank you so much and see you when I
Thank
see
you,
you.
Zivile. I really appreciated being on there.